Welcome back, everybody. I'm Jerry, and today we're going to go over my Week 6 power rankings where I go over all 32 teams and rank them accordingly. And honestly, didn't have a lot of movers this week. A lot of the bad teams got worse, and the good teams started to look better. So it was tough for me to get some movers at the top and the bottom, but there are still some pretty significant moves this week. So stay tuned, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We're at 382 subscribers at the moment I'm recording this video. I'm aiming for 500 though. We're skipping right past 400. I want to hit 500. So tell your friends, tell your family, your folks, whatever. And let's get right into this video. Starting off, we have number 32. They're staying right where they're at, the New England Patriots. Looked a little more promising. Got an injured guy on the screen right now, Ramondre Stevenson. And then we got Jacoby Brissett riding the pine. But doesn't matter because Drake May is the quarterback of the future. He has a couple good throws in this game and a couple bad throws too. So I would say you can't really buy in too much to just this one game, obviously. I think you saw some good things from Drake May that you'd like to see. You saw some big physical runs, not necessarily Josh Allen-esque, where he's putting his life on the line. But I liked what I saw from Drake May, and just a little flashes, okay. Not enough to move them up, though. They lose by like 20 points in this one. Another rough loss for him. And honestly, these bottom like 5 to almost 10 teams, it was tough to move any of them because they all just stunk this week. Like nobody really showed any promise that would suggest that they should move up. So don't need to talk about the Patriots anymore. They're at the bottom. Next, we have the Cleveland Browns, who again didn't move again. Looked awful. I think it's really Jameis Winston time. They finally get Nick Chubb back, and my fantasy team gets Nick Chubb for the first time, which will be great. But I just, again, kind of a dumpster fire of a team. I think you could there's a reason, like you could put the Patriots ahead of the Browns, but again, a lot of these teams at the bottom, none of them did enough for me to want to like, I didn't want to move teams just to move them. So like, sure, very easy to make an argument. Oh, it looked a little promising with Drake May, still got blown out. Whereas the Cleveland Browns stayed in it against the Eagles. So however you want to look at that, kind of the reason I didn't move them. Still dumpster fire, shit organization, just got rid of Amari Cooper. But on the plus side, close game against the Eagles, who I still think are a decent team, but they definitely don't look like they've been in the past. I might have them too high on this one, so we'll stay tuned for that. But the Cleveland Browns stay at 31, right behind the Jacksonville Jaguars, who is another team where, they had a good week last week and they finally got a win. And then they get stomped in London, which is supposed to be their hometown. A lot of Bears fans traveled and made it a bit closer to a home game in this one, and the Jaguars just got stomped. Wasn't even close. Probably, first quarter was close. Not a lot going on for the Bears there or the Jaguars. Bears ran away with it, never gave it back. Jacksonville Jaguars looked silly. Travis Etienne's been out. Hasn't mattered because Tank Bigsby's been doing better. And then, you've got even D'Ernest Johnson looked pretty good in this game. But Trevor Lawrence needs to be better. He gets Evan Ingram back and targets him 10 times. Evan Ingram catches all 10 of them. Brian Thomas Jr.'s been a pretty good target. Not much use in this game. It was more of a Gabe Davis show. But so, there's promise there with, some of the names. Gabe Davis, Brian Thomas Jr. is exciting. Tank Bigsby's been doing well. ATN, Trevor Lawrence. You'd think they might do well, but their defense is so bad, 31st in points per game and yards per game, making them struggle where the offense would have to win the game, and the offense clearly isn't doing enough. So they stay at 30. Again, another poverty-looking franchise at the bottom tier here. Right behind the Raiders. So Raiders talk about Max Crosby leaving, which don't know if that's actually going to happen. But we've got, talking about him leaving. They just get rid of Devontae. Aiden O'Connell it's not it for me. Like there's some decent plays that he's made, but I'm still a fan of Gardner Minshew. I know he didn't look good this season, but this is just another team, 27th in points per game on offense, 27th on defense. Christian Wilkins has been injured. Max Crosby obviously getting frustrated, pushing Antonio Pierce around, and just a lot of struggles. Only DB you can really think of, name rings a bell, is Jack Jones, and he did have the sweet one-handed interception at a time, also brought a gun to an airport. So Vegas Raiders stay at 29, and again, not another mover. It's like, what do I do here? I don't think they got blown out by the Steelers. Steelers hadn't really showed a lot on offense except for one game. Not really a surprise that the Raiders offense didn't do well against that Steelers defense, but just not another bad week for the Raiders. And again, a lot of these teams you could make, I'm sure you can comment down below arguments for why these teams should move around, but I just can't think of a good enough reason that they should shift around. Tennessee Titans, another one where play a close game, end up losing again. So I just, it's just Will Levis does not seem like the guy there. I'd like to see Mason Rudolph. As much of a fan of the heart that Will Levis plays with, he maybe needs to go to a quarterback school or, do some drills maybe in the offseason. Maybe I just sit on the bench for the rest of the year, see what Mason Rudolph can do with the team, because he just makes a lot of stupid decisions this game. He doesn't even throw for 100 yards. So not a great week for the Titans and Will Levis. Again, I guess you got promise in the run game with Tony Pollard looking good this year, and the offensive line honestly has been pretty decent. And the defense, very underrated defense. Nobody's really talking about the Titans defense, but 13th in points per game, first in yards per game. And I know their DB room, oddly enough, has been ranked high. Obviously Snead's in there, nice name to think of. And then but the edge rushers, no like super crazy, like top tier elite names, but defense has been playing well. The offense just can't score and been causing them issues. So they're 1-4 and they're 28th on my power rankings, right behind the Carolina Panthers, who this is another one where they get stomped this week by the Falcons. But I still think the offense has looked a little bit better with Andy Dalton. It's starting to fall down a slippery slope here where the first week, kind of the second week that Andy Dalton comes in, the Panthers look a lot better. You see Chuba Hubbard doing a lot better. And then it just all kind of goes downhill. And these last 2 weeks after getting smoked by the Bears and getting smoked by the Falcons just still don't look like a good team. And it looks like, Bryce Young, they got the picture of him smiling on the sideline because he's like, when you're about to go back in. And I don't know. It's an interesting situation where, what do you gain from him going back in? I guess it would be reps. But it's just like, I guess some of the receivers could potentially stick around. I guess you'd want to try to retain Deontay Johnson, Xavier Legette, or however you say it. And then, maybe pair Bryce Young with those couple people just so you can gain rapport if you think that he's going to be your franchise guy. But you also have to start deciding, he hasn't looked good. And not only because of faults at offensive line, it's been him too, where he takes too long to throw the ball or just can't really throw with as much anticipation as he'd like and has issues. So do you put Bryce Young back in? I don't know. Either way, I don't think the Panthers are worthy of moving up or down this week. Again, getting smoked by the Falcons. So they stay at 27, right behind the Dolphins on a bye week. So we don't have anything to talk about with the Dolphins. Usually teams will stay where they're at on a bye week. In this case, it stays the same. Makes sense. Nothing changes. Next, we have the Rams. Also had a bye week. Had them right next to each other. I don't really see why you'd move a team super far, again, on a bye week, especially considering this next team, the Jets. Could see why you'd want to move them back, but they play a close game against the Bills, a game where they could win, and I still have the Bills as a top team. So if you factor that in, that they had multiple opportunities to win the game, yes, they still lost. They also acquire Devontae Adams, so maybe after seeing these next couple teams, you'd want to argue for the Jets to be higher, and I could accept that. But let's see. Let's see what you think. Should the Jets be higher than the Giants? Well, Giants ended up looking like a tougher loss. It was a close game, one-score game the whole time against the Bengals, who you could say, oh, the Bengals haven't really been there that good, Jerry. Why do you have the Jets ahead of the Giants? And it's just, or the Jets behind the Giants. And I would concede that. I think if you want to assume that Devontae is going to make the team a lot better, I could see why you'd want to put the Jets ahead of them. My whole thinking was, the game, it did look decent, but I thought their defense played worse, without Robert Saleh being there. And then I also think that the Jets offense didn't necessarily look a lot better. Breece Hall had a lot better game, but Aaron Rodgers still hasn't been playing great football. And that's why I don't think that getting Devontae is, everybody's talking, oh, they're a Super Bowl contender again. The bets are going to, I don't think that's going to be the case. I might be eating my words later in the season, but I don't think they did anything to be better than the Giants. And I still think that the Giants I think they're a bad team, but I think they're I think people think that they're worse than they actually are. Because if you look at the Giants, their defense, ninth in points per game, 10th in yards per game. Who did they acquire? Brian Burns. Who did they lose? Xavier McKinney. That's a good guy. He's on the Packers now, and he's been a good football player. And so, yeah, you got Brian Burns. Kevon Thibodeau's even been out, and their defense has still stayed strong. And you're starting to see their offense click. So that's why I thought, let's go back. Defense, 7th in points per game, 2nd in yards per game. Obviously way better, and you'd look, not way better, but a little better. I don't know. You can make your argument for the Jets to be higher. I'm going to stop nagging about it. Let's just move on to the Bengals, who are the next team, which only makes sense. They just beat the Giants, but they barely beat them. And I thought their offense should have done a lot better in this game. Their offense was very stagnant the whole game. Get a little bit better of a game for Chase Brown, maybe starting to slide into a RB1 role or maybe a higher percentage of the carries. But I think Joe Burrow needed to be better. And I just thought they kind of played down to the Browns, because I think the Cincinnati Bengals, you'd still think of them as being a better team, but they've done nothing to show it, and they're 2-4. Their only win is against the Giants, or they don't really have any like big exciting win, only beating bad teams there. So I guess they played close to the Ravens, but still, you got to consistently win games and show it and blow out bad teams and win close games against good teams. They haven't done it yet. So the Bengals will stay down low for now. Next, we have the Indianapolis Colts, who barely win over the Titans again, who I don't think were a very good team. I don't think they did anything worthy of moving up. They won, though, so I don't really think you can move them behind the Bengals. We'll go over the teams, which teams are next to, and when we revise my list after. But yeah, I don't think it's going to be good for the Colts with Anthony Richardson coming back. Oddly enough, I think the record this year is going to go down. I think it's going to be valuable for him to get reps because he needs to get better at throwing the football. But I don't think it's going to help him moving forward. So although he is pointing up, I think the Colts stock is down, unfortunately. But right now they're at 21, right behind the Denver Broncos, who do move back a spot in the loss to the Chargers. Chargers? Yeah, they lost to the Chargers, right? Close game. Oh, yeah. This game, Chargers initially blowing them out of the water, wasn't even close. Broncos make a move back and start to look close. Bo Nix starting to make some big plays on offense, and seems like he's starting to learn it some more. And with how that defense is playing, fourth in points per game, 4th in yards per game, starting to look like they could be a complete team. We're just talking about the Giants, how they have, they've had a really good defense, in my opinion, kind of underrated defense this year. The offense just hasn't been putting it together, but they've shown flashes, and I think the Broncos with the better record and doing a little bit more. They end up moving back to the Broncos. The Broncos, yeah, they lost to the Chargers. I don't know why this keeps slipping my mind here, but again, they move back a spot because they lose, but I still think they're a little better, than the Giants and the Bengals and the previous teams that we talked about. But the Broncos end up at 20 at 3-3, right behind the Arizona Cardinals. This is another team where I think you could definitely make the argument for Broncos over the Cardinals. We'll talk about. I'll leave the matchups for the end of the video and where I think I could be wrong and move things around, because I'll typically step back, look at the big picture, and I go, hey, maybe I'm wrong about this. Well, the Cardinals, pretty bad loss to the Packers this week, kind of get smoked. Wasn't even really close. They lose Marvin Harrison Jr. And it's just, I still don't think Kyler Murray's that guy. And, he continues to show it time and time again. And, he had a couple flashes this year and a couple, decent plays, or I guess even a couple decent games, but I just don't think he's it. And I think it makes it very tough for the Cardinals organization moving forward, and especially tough one with losing Marvin Harrison Jr. He's questionable to play this week. So we're going to have to see what happens moving forward with the Cardinals. I think they're going to keep moving down the list, especially with a couple of those teams behind them on the rise. But they stay just moving back one spot to 19 for me. Again, they're big win early on, and then their other win, the big win obviously against the Rams, kind of holding them up right now. But again, looking like they could be moving down soon, but they reside at 19 for this week, right behind the Cowboys, 3-3. this was a horrible week for the Cowboys. I think you'd argue to move them to the bottom of the list with how poorly they played against the Lions in this game. Not much else to talk about, but the Cowboys sucked this week. It was really bad. Offense, defense, you name it. Brandon Aubrey was the player of the game for the Cowboys, just getting those 3 field goals. So Cowboys move way back, minus 42 on the point differential, one of the worst in the league. Obviously, there was, you saw 100 on the screen and some other worse ones, but they're towards the bottom of the list in point differential. It's not great. Typically, Cowboys, you'll assume they'll have a good defense and they'll kind of do enough on offense and maybe even sometimes have a high-powered offense where, Dak's getting the ball to CD, led the league in Dak led the league in passing not long ago. So when you're at 30th in points per game on the defense, 19th on offense, it's not a good situation for the Cowboys. And if they keep playing like they did, they are going to be in that bottom 6 to 8 tier. But right now they're at 18, right behind the Saints, who continue to move back. They played 2 games like they're going to be a Super Bowl team, and then they just stink the rest of the season so far. So there's not really much to talk about here. Pretty bad loss to the Buccaneers, and this is another team. They just need to get back to those first 2 games form. It's going to be very difficult. You've got Chris Olave is going to be out. Rashid Shaheed is going to be out, who got one of their few touchdowns in the last game on a punt return. And your starting quarterback, Derek Carr, is out. So they're going to be leaning on Spencer Rattler, probably getting the ball to Kamara a lot. And, Taysom Hill's injured as well. He's doubtful to play in the next game, but it's going to be tough for him to come back. So it seems like the Saints are just going to keep sliding down this power rankings poll here. Right now they're at 17. Again, I could see them easily getting into the 20s next week, especially if those couple teams that I talked about being on the rise move back. Look for the Cowboys, the Saints, Cardinals all to be moving down. Could be soon. Next, we have the Los Angeles Chargers. Pretty big mover up. One of the biggest movers up this week. Just kind of played a strong early game against the Broncos. And again, biggest mover this week. Not really great to me. I think it's only because of how well their offense functioned early on. They kind of gave in too much to the run at the end, and they let up a little bit too much for me. Took their foot off the gas and let the Broncos come back. And seeing that, the Broncos, I think, technically could have come back and won that game. So a little too close for comfort for me. So that's why, Chargers, although the biggest mover of the week, the biggest movers and, forward and backward are definitely getting smaller as the season goes on, as every team kind of slots themselves into a place on my power rankings board. But the number 1 points per game defense, kind of an underrated thing from the Chargers. You don't really expect it. I think it also has to do with the teams that they played. But I've got them at 16 right now, 3-2, plus 25 on the point differential, on the rise, just outside of the playoff picture. And it'll be tough for me to imagine the Chargers in the playoff picture, but I think this is probably, at the end of the season, could be where they rank, just outside of the playoff picture. So they're at 16, right behind the Seattle Seahawks, who continue to move themselves back. I initially moved them back to 13, but with how sad the offense has been, and it's just kind of basically all their yards seem to be in garbage time. And the struggles from Geno, the interceptions, and just turning the ball over in silly ways. And their offensive line has been dog shit. Their defensive line has been injured. And when you're hurting in the trenches and not doing well, your team overall is usually not going to do well. And that's why some of the teams at the top are at the top. But the Seattle Seahawks move back 4 spots. One of the biggest movers, this time backwards, the Seattle Seahawks to 15. They moved to 3-3 at 1.3-0. So on a bit of a losing streak, bit of a slump here. Again, dealing with some injuries, but it's not looking good for them, and they're going to need to step it up, pick up the pace. You've got luckily the 49ers in your division are at 3-3 as well, but it's going to be a tough one, battling with them. So Seattle Seahawks move back 4 spots to 15, right behind the Pittsburgh Steelers, who move up 3 spots. Bigger mover moving up. This was kind of a last-minute decision. The Pittsburgh Steelers and the next team just slotted up ahead of the Seahawks with just kind of a recency bias. And I didn't change the Steelers. Apologies about that. You've noticed the graphic up there has changed to 4-2. Had them at 3-2. Forgot to change the number. They're at 4-2 now. Two losses. Obviously, we had the one to the Colts, not really great, and then to the Cowboys as well. So you look at two bad losses there, and you start to think, the Steelers might be shit, but then they come back and they have a good week against the Raiders there. So in a good week, they do move up pretty big time, and 4-2 is not bad, and especially at this point in the season, to have the 4 wins under your belt is good. I think it's a mistake for them to put Russ in. That's a big flaw. Like Justin Fields, although I don't think he's been this all-star quarterback that people have been trying to portray him as. I think he's just been good. I think he's been okay. I do think their offense has been a little stagnant. Their points per game and their yards per game would show that as well. 20th and 26th, especially after a 32-point win over the Raiders. It doesn't really tickle my fancy, if you will. So I think the Pittsburgh Steelers, they move up this week, and I honestly, the Russ news that he's going to start kind of just came out. I'd even consider moving him back, just kind of assuming how the week goes, but I left them where they're at just because that's kind of where they were in my mind. So they move up to 14, back into that like playoff picture sort of scenario. I think it's a mistake to put Russ in. I think the offense could be doing better, but I think it's going to hurt your team's morale. And if Russ stinks, it's really tough to put Justin Fields back in my opinion. We'll have to see what happens with that. Pittsburgh Steelers move up 3 spots to 14 at 4-2, not 3-2. Next, we have the Chicago Bears, who also move up 3 spots, kind of mirroring the Steelers there. Their offense has been way better, 12th in points per game. They have a monster win this week over the Jaguars in London, and then they have a monster week last week against the Panthers. Now, granted, those are probably 2 of the worst defenses in the league, so of course they're going to do better. But I think that if you're a good winning team, you have to win close games against good teams, which they haven't done yet. They'll have a lot of opportunities to do that later in the year with how tough their schedule gets later. Bears fans are coining their second half of the season the gauntlet. That's what they're calling it, with how tough the second half is and the strongest strength of schedule by a mile, as far as the rest of the year is concerned. So that would definitely be an opportunity for them to move back if they start getting blown out, have bad losses. And so I think to get into a top 10, the Bears are going to have to either dominate a good football team, or they're going to have to, win a close game against one of those top tier elite football teams, which is seeming to be the Minnesota Vikings or the Detroit Lions or the Green Bay Packers, all in their division. Those divisional games are coming up. But right now they're at 13. I think this is a possible top 10 team. This is also a team that could move, in my opinion, could move back down to 20. Because you look at their schedule through the rest of the season, they could be back at 7-10. I'd like to think they'll be at 8-9 or 9-8, but they could be at 7-10 again with how difficult it is. So I got the Bears at 13th, again, moving up 3 spots. So good move for now. Definitely could move back 13 for now. Next, we have 12, Atlanta Falcons. Another big win. Not beating a good team this week, but the Falcons have been on the up and up, which that's not really a phrase that I've ever said in my life, but that's what they did. And they're at 11 points per game, 11th in points per game, 8th in yards per game, plus 14 only on the point differential, but 4-2. They beat those good teams, like we talked about, and then dominated those bad teams. So for me, it moves up 1 spot this week. Again, not very impressive to win. What was it, 38-20 against the Panthers, but still a win, and they move up on my list to 12. Next, we have the Philadelphia Eagles, who this is another team I think it'd be very easy to put the Falcons ahead of them, just because what have the Eagles done this year to show that they're this great team? They barely beat the Browns this week, but I do move them up just because it didn't feel right. I don't know. I could have kept them where they're at for beating the Browns, especially with the being healthy again too. So I don't know. You could definitely make an argument for the Eagles to be behind the Falcons, and I think the Eagles at this point, until they show me otherwise, are going to be more likely to moving backward than they're moving forward. They haven't really looked to me like a top 10 team. So the fact that I have them at 11 even kind of puzzles me. -6 on a point differential so far this year. too. At a 3-2 record is not great. So just very mid football team, and that's kind of what they're seeming like they're going to be. There's all the problems with Nick Sirianni. They want to, Channing to fire him mid-game, and then he starts firing back at the fans after only beating the Browns by 4. So understand the frustration there. But yeah, Eagles don't seem to me like they're going to move. Like they're going to have to do something crazy this next week for them to move up. So they're at 11 for now. Right behind the Green Bay Packers, who, yes, they get a big win. Again, this is it was over the Cardinals, which I don't think is very impressive. And the reason they're moving back for me is because I honestly just thought I had them a little too highly rated. And I was talking about how I kind of had them higher on my rankings, assuming that, if they can play this good with Malik Willis, then they can do even better with Jordan Love. And Jordan Love's kind of proven that he can throw touchdown passes, but he's also going to turn the ball over. And so got to be more careful there. But the Green Bay Packers all around have been a good football team. You see 9th in points per game on offense, 8th in points per game on, 8th and 9th in offense and defense. You get the point. There's really not many other teams that are in the top 10 for both offense and defense. This is another one you could argue, while they've really only done this against, not very good teams, but you got to remember they did play a very close game against the Minnesota Vikings, who have been a top team in the league. Also, the Green Bay Packers, Bears, Lions, and Vikings, all they are 1, 2, 3, and 4 in the point differential. So shows that they can beat beat teams by a wide margin, which I think is a factor in being a great team. But I think only reason they moved back this week is because I had them a little too high rated. And I think it's fair that they end up being behind the Washington Commanders, who also moved back in a close game against the Ravens. Again, this is another one where it's a winnable game for them. 2nd in points per game on offense, 5th in yards per game. Obviously, the defense has a rough week with how well the Ravens were able to move the ball, but everybody's going to have some of those games on their schedule where their defense, their ranking in the league is going to drop down just because they play a really good high-powered offense that's seemingly difficult to stop, and that's the Ravens with Derrick Henry in the backfield, who's able to just run for however far he wants on every play. You have to deal with the elusiveness of Lamar Jackson, as well as him being able to throw for 300 yards, it seems like, whenever he wants. So a tough one this week for the Commanders. They do move back 2 spots. I think if you get a win there, it's a huge win, and they might even be in my top 5, considering they were at 7 last week, but still looked like a top 10 team, and the Commanders have been a great football team. Their first loss, I believe, was week 1, which is like, okay, rookie quarterback, sorry, not always going to be great, whatever. And then the other loss, whatever that one was, the other one is to the Ravens, who, had a couple rough weeks, but recency bias says that they're a really good football team. So Commanders only move back 2 spots, still stay in the top 10, but do move back to 9, right behind the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who get another big win over the Saints, who, again, Saints looked really good week 1 and 2, not so good this week, and kind of going down and down and down. So they only move up 1 spot because a win over the very injured Saints, and just Derek Carr being out. You got your top 2 receivers out now. It seems like it's going to be. We talked about the Saints already, but it seems like it's going to be a tough one there. And so that, to me, makes the Buccaneers win not as impressive. Yeah, they scored 51 points, which is big time. I think their defense could have done a little bit better. Yeah, there was a lot of points in garbage time too, but I think Tampa Bay Buccaneers are a great football team, and definitely deserving of being in this top 10. And they sit at 8 for me right now. Again, just moving up that 1 spot, but it is behind the San Francisco 49ers, who move up 3 spots. Again, kind of starting to be the 49ers again, and I think their team very impressive. Obviously, the win over the Seahawks this week, Thursday Night Football, and it was a big win too. Seahawks got some of their points in garbage time too. We talked about that earlier on with the Seahawks, and so I think 49ers are still that team even without Christian McCaffrey. That's what everybody keeps remembering. Now, granted, he might not come back this year. I don't think that affects the 49ers too much. Obviously a big loss. Not saying that losing Christian McCaffrey isn't a big loss, but I just don't think that affects the team as much as, seeing how well it's able to operate even when you put Jordan Mason in. Isaac Ruendo has a 76-yard run. So the offense can still function. I think he is a game changer. But I guess he will add a large benefit if he's there. I don't think it harms the team too much if he's gone because of how good that offense is. So San Francisco 49ers move up 3 spots to 7. Yes, it's at 3-3, but I still think they're very worthy of being a top football team. And when you look at the position battles, offense and defense, it's really tough to be better than them right now. So I've got the 49ers up there at 7, right behind the Buffalo Bills, who sit tight at 6. Again, Bills barely beat the Jets. I don't think that you could say that the Bills are, worse than the 49ers, especially with that little slum of a run the 49ers had. So they kind of stay put where they're at. If they won better by the Jets, I think there would be hope for them to move up, but it's going to be tough to jump up across the Baltimore Ravens, who again get a big win over the Commanders there. Offense has seemingly been unstoppable. I think their defense needs to be better. And if the Baltimore Ravens did lose this game, I think it'd be a big loss for them, and they might be, probably in that 9 spot where the Commanders are at. And it probably would have been because of their defense, because although the Ravens defense hasn't been, that Ravens Super Bowl defense that you would think about, their offense has been one of the best in the league and shown that they can do it on the ground, through the air, whatever you want, and made it very difficult for other teams. So their defense doesn't have to do as well, but they stay at 5. Again, if their defense keeps slipping, I think they could move back. Obviously, the Bills acquire Amari Cooper, and it could be a big advantage for them moving forward. But for now, Baltimore Ravens stay at 5, right behind the Houston Texans, who is another tough one where it's a big win, but it's over the Patriots. And, Drake May did start to look good. He had a couple, good unexpected plays you wouldn't expect the Texans to allow. But I think it's just another tough one where, would you say that the Texans are still better than the Ravens? I think with that slump the Ravens had, the Texans really hadn't had that. I think the Texans need to win by wider margins and have really played down to their opponents at times, not this week. That's kind of why they stay up. But they are 5-1, but the point differential is only +8, which is wild to me that their record is so good and they've only scored 8 more points. So need to start getting some bigger wins like they have. So I guess that's a little bit of their proof. But it wasn't really enough to move them past these other teams, especially this one, the Detroit Lions, which you'd think, how could the Detroit Lions murder the Cowboys like that and not move up and, move to 1st in points per game, 3rd in yards per game, 8th in points per game on defense, 13th in yards per game, which is, I think, overall the best ranking across the board of all those rankings that I talked about. I think that's a little inflated because of how the last 2 weeks have went for the Detroit Lions. But I'd also like to add that, it's tough. I think I'd like to move them ahead. Basically, here, I'm going to rip off the Band-Aid. Chiefs and then the Minnesota Vikings. They both had bye weeks this week. So what do you want me to do with the Lions? I could move the Lions ahead and go, look, the Lions are the best. But I didn't think you could talk me into it now that I'm talking about it. You could tell me the Lions are the best team in the league. I also don't like to overreact to, they had 2 good weeks, which when you stack them back to back, I think is big time. But we didn't get a chance. The Chiefs and the Vikings didn't get a chance to defend themselves. So yeah, if the Vikings shit the bed and the Chiefs shit the bed this week, bet your sweet bippy they're moving backwards, and the Lions will be number 1. But they stick at 3 for now, right behind the Kansas City Chiefs and the Minnesota Vikings, who have bye weeks. And then we move on to the week 6 power rankings. Oh, everything said week 6 and it's week 7. God damn it. All right, well, title will be right. Other graphic, that's okay. Just imagine at the top that it says week 7. See, just like that. So week 7, 2024 power rankings come to an end here. And I think let's talk about teams that I think could move around. I think Patriots definitely could move out of that back spot, especially with how shitty the Browns have looked. I I think the Browns, Jaguars, Raiders, Titans, Panthers, Dolphins until Tua comes back, all of those teams are just going to kind of jumble around at that 27 and lower, even 26 and lower spot. I think Tua comes back, definitely could see the team move up to a mid tier. I think if he doesn't come back soon, though, it's going to be tough to dig them out of that hole. But at the very least, 27 to 32 seem like they're just going to jump around. I think if Drake May starts to pick it up quick, you get Ramondre back, maybe the offense looks a little better. Gerard Mayo can instill something on that defense. I think you could see him break out of that, like break into the lower 20s. I think you can make an argument the Jets should be probably 21. I think you could slide Colts, Bengals. I think maybe even put the Bengals ahead of the, I don't know, you put the Bengals ahead of the Colts. I don't know if you can do that yet. Bengals just need to win on a consistent basis for me to do that. I think you move the Jets ahead of them, though. So I maybe put the Jets at 20, 21, then even maybe the Bengals at 22 still. Colts move back to 23, then the Giants to 24. I'd be okay with that. Look at the Broncos. I think the Broncos easily could be ahead of the Cardinals and maybe even the Cowboys. I think the probably should have flipped the Broncos and the Cardinals. Just didn't really seem right to leave them where they're at with how shitty they looked in the first half. But if you factor in that second half and their kind of comeback in that game, I think, gives them there's opportunity to move up for sure there. Another one, move the Seahawks back pretty far, but I think that's reasonable. I think the Eagles could be moved back. I think it'd be very easy to put the Eagles behind the Falcons this week. And I think if you see another week where you get a close game from, I guess if it's a close game against a bad team from the Eagles, again, should look into who they play. But if it's just not a convincing win, or if it's a loss, I would assume the Eagles probably might move behind the Bears and maybe even the Steelers, depending on how they do this week with Russ starting. And then towards the top, again, I think you could make an argument for the Lions to even be number one. I think you could make an argument for maybe the Ravens, ahead of the Texans. I don't know, just with their record and how everything is, it's tough to do that. But I think Lions definitely could be number one this week, and I would definitely, like, if you comment that down below, I'd probably give it a like, because I think that's a very reasonable thing to put right now. But let me know what you think down below of my power rankings. Which team am I way too high on? Is there a team that I'm too low on? But that's going to be it. So thank you for watching and have a great day. It seemed like the worst team, the bad teams, the bad teams got worse and the good teams got better. Okay, that's just going to be a blooper. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Jerry, and today we've got the video that we're going to watch about power rankings.